versus Wade canceled the Hippocratic Oath after Vietnam. It's punishment. We're being punished. And I know 16 and pregnants out there like, abortions, but first do no harm, or you're not a doctor. The Stoic Oath is the cornerstone of all diplomacy. We're the most advanced democracy on the planet. Why should we have to compete? Humanity's closest natural enemies. People think that different religions have different stipulations for what constitutes a doctor. No. First, do no harm, or you're not one. Down with the patriarchy, I know, but the doctor works for a grown-up. He has to swear to this senator, judge, priest, or bard of some sort, this guild master, that he will first do no harm, as to not embarrass his guild, his clan, his order of sovereignty. The Hippocratic Oath specifically precludes chemical abortions because at the time it was written, they were as likely to kill you as the fetus, whether prescribed by a doctor or not. Christians don't like virgin sacrifice, and life starts at conception. But where normal delivery poses a threat to the mother, surgery is allowed. We have the C-section. So in cases where the pregnancy is a health risk, it's a necessary medical procedure. But if life starts at conception and we do not allow virgin sacrifice, meaning we're not giving it to God, I know this is taboo for most people. You gotta look at it like a doctor, like a diplomat. Gotta be reasonable. There's no reason that Harvard should tie all our doctors' hands. 40-year crack epidemic full of school shootings. 24 years ago, Washington noticed a war on terror. First, I shall do no harm. Now, I'm sorry I cannot comply with your request. I could lose my practice. When the oath was written, you could lose your life, like Socrates. First, I shall do no harm. I shall guard my charge from injustice. What else do we need from the government if these stipulations are not satisfied? But I guess we called Charles de Gaulle a terrorist, and the Gauls were like, oh, that's how it's going to be. Europe should not be an arena for terror. We've got the democracy, first, do no harm, and then there's the Olympics, and that's all the peace. It's already paid for, it's free. Islam means peace, which is suspect. Marauding barbarians talking about peace. Like, what were we doing before? See, as long as Aryans are allowed to trade freely, there's no reason to interrupt the peace. Already had peace. Islam means peace. So this outfit comes to town, and now this is peace. Well, now, if you want them to leave, that means you don't like peace. They're against peace. Islam's all about granting wishes, too. A real religion respects church and state. Otherwise, wouldn't have a word for it. Like, I think we'll call this the state. And what about this over here? That's more state. So they have this ancient, medieval book. And they'll try democracy once they have to. But democracy allows them to keep that book. If it's not a real religion, is it a real democracy? So honestly, if the church were allowed to take its rightful place in society, whether they were allowed to get their high school abortions or not, the mothers and children have resources. Hasn't always worked in the past, but I think we're at that technological level now where we can. But the church produces sincere, devout, pious people. It's not just your average 9 to 5. We think of certain institutions as belonging to the state now because democracy is a liberal idea, and around starting with the Industrial Revolution, certain standards had to be guaranteed. But shouldn't we deduct directly from our income taxes to the church of our choice? No confusion, this elaborate setup to make it look like conflicting loyalties or whatever. Muslims act like I'm their business. And I'm like, I have never stood within the walls of any mosque that is still standing in the eyes of God. And they just don't pay attention. It's not a real religion. All these great lengths these idiots went to, completely unnecessary. What was the point of bringing that foreign immunity here? Flees the country and you just don't even, he fled the country. What do you expect a poor man to do? How bad does a guy have to lose? How dry does a cow have to get before this farmer stops squeezing the teats? They brought this poor bastard all the way over here to play Nazi for these stupid Protestants. And I'm like, well, now it's just a conventional foreign attack. You can investigate, or there's no need for all these conflicting sectarian cults. Like everything has to have IRS status. I'll tell you how this works, okay? You got a problem with me, some reason you can't just take it up with me. There's a church here in town, and they don't like me either. I would do almost anything in the world for the Irish and the Catholics in that order. So, I mean, it's not for purpose of credential or anything. Doctor, so, you know, I mean, as far as practical comparative theologists, there's somebody you wanted me to, I don't know, compare notes, like you want me to debate somebody? I swore a Hippocratic Oath, and I sent it to the Vatican on Twitter. I mean, this was after I got kicked out of the Catholic Church by police for calling the Nigerian priests Boko Haram and declaring "Bring the Dogs to Church" Day. There's been a couple times, but you know, don't pretend you're my fan club. It's official. So I have guidelines for the guarantee of religious freedom, medical ethics for Catholic women, should cover everybody, and I don't know, a little blurb for freedom of the press, whatever, basically how to establish who gets the freedom of the press, who shall be the free press. And now it's reliable. Now it makes sense. Now the news isn't competing for sponsorship from our mutual, like, against their own best interest. I mean, you work for us, right? Who's got your back? Now everybody has a reason to notice what anybody else is doing wrong. One corporation has every reason to expose the news. This company's activities are putting our correspondents at risk and endangering operations. The war at home, because Vietnam has just proved we were ridiculous. Called Charles de Gaulle a terrorist, and then we go to Vietnam and march the military-industrial complex back and forth through a narrow strip of jungle. 9 years. They can use Cambodia, we can't. And when Vietnam ended, we got the Satanic Bible, Roe versus Wade, corporate prisons, which don't exist in a democracy. They disarmed our doctors. They took away our first line of defense, one of our most intimate public services. First, do no harm, or you don't have the same authority. 3,000 years of prestige behind the word doctor, and it is contingent upon the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm, or there's no greater good. Your intent is established. And they just wanted us to do that so they could manage us a little better. So whether or not Roe versus Wade is a thing, there's no, I mean, the Hippocratic Oath is the deciding factor. They said they had to get rid of it for Roe versus Wade. Really just a matter of someone knowledgeable who cared enough, who motivated to really think about it. Is it my religion? I should just be allowed to talk to the Catholics. Oh, am I out? Did they kick me out? Let me get this straight. Every major religion on the planet contracting their tech support through Babu, just so the Pope can give me the cold shoulder? Like, what about the other children? Not my fault. I'm a trained killer. I can't possibly rape all these Protestants by myself. Frankly, I don't think it's humane to totally prohibit, like, any kind of abortion or birth control and not enforce shotgun weddings. If you look at the amount of ostensible government overreach in the media today, all the other rules they're willing to bend, you can't just make the kids get married. And really there's a question of whether the people who own the internet, the ones that telling us, threatening us with violations of our First Amendment, obviously they're not authorized to do that. So then the question arises whether or not they're entitled to their position. It doesn't matter how pretty you are. First, do no harm, or the time for talk has passed. They act like it's some all-encompassing restrictions, blasphemy. It's not blasphemy. You want the job or not? Look at the blasphemy we gotta sign off on just to open a social media account. You can't just put the fetus in a hazardous waste bag for money. The church needs a death certificate so they can mourn. They're very serious about this stuff. As long as we can provide an option, an alternative, we can assuage their conscience. The realities of the day will, take precedent. But there's got to be somebody out there keeping track. Like, think about it. Global war on terror. My vaginas! mfrodeo.blogspot.com, my first rodeo. so glad you all could join us.